Golden chains. The autumn sunlight streamed through the windows of the Meridian Gallery, casting a golden glow over the sculptures and paintings that adorned the space. Olivia Bennet tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear as she adjusted the lighting for her interior design exhibition. At 32, she had established herself as one of the most promising designers in the city, known for her ability to blend modern aesthetics with warmth and functionality. "The balance of light and shadow in this space is extraordinary," came a deep voice from behind her. Olivia turned to find herself looking into the most penetrating blue eyes she'd ever seen. The man extended his hand, his smile confident and disarming. "Jackson Reed. I own the Monarch Development Group." Olivia recognized the name immediately. Monarch was responsible for some of the most exclusive residential and commercial properties on the East Coast. "Olivia Bennet," she replied, shaking his hand. "I'm familiar with your Lakeview Residences project. The architecture is stunning. Yet the interiors lack the soul that your work has," Jackson said, gesturing to her exhibition. "I've been following your career with interest, Ms. Bennet." Their conversation flowed effortlessly from design philosophy to travel experiences. By the end of the evening, Olivia found herself accepting an invitation to dinner the following night. Jackson's charm was irresistible. His knowledge of art, his apparent respect for her work, and the intensity with which he listened to her ideas. Their courtship was a whirlwind of elegant restaurants, weekend trips to coastal towns, and passionate conversations about creating spaces that transformed lives. Jackson showered her with thoughtful gifts: rare art books, a vintage drafting table she'd admired, access to exclusive design events. "You understand spaces in a way few people do," he told her one evening as they stood on the balcony of his penthouse. "Together, we could create something revolutionary in the design world." When he proposed after 6 months, Olivia's closest friend, Daniela, expressed concern. "It seems fast, Liv, and sometimes when you talk about him, it feels like you're trying to convince yourself rather than me." But Olivia dismissed her worries. "He believes in my vision, Danny. Do you know how rare that is in this industry?" The wedding was an extravagant affair at Jackson's estate. Olivia's parents, middle-class educators who had always supported her creative pursuits, seemed overwhelmed by the opulence, but pleased at their daughter's happiness. The subtle shifts began 3 months into their marriage. When Olivia mentioned opening her own design firm, Jackson suggested she wait. "The market's unstable right now," he explained. "Besides, I have several properties that could benefit from your touch. Why not start there?" His reasoning seemed sound, and the projects were interesting. Gradually, Olivia found herself working exclusively on Jackson's developments, her wider professional connections slowly fading. When she planned to attend a design conference in Chicago, Jackson arranged a surprise anniversary trip to Bali that coincided with the dates. "You work too hard," he insisted. "You deserve to be pampered." Each time Olivia reconnected with old friends or colleagues, Jackson would find subtle ways to interfere, scheduling last-minute dinner parties with important clients or questioning their motives. "Trevor only invited you to collaborate because he wants to leverage my connections," he said when her former design partner reached out. "People always have angles, Olivia. I'm just protecting you." By their first anniversary, Olivia's vibrant social circle had dwindled to Jackson's associates and their partners. Her once thriving independent career had been absorbed into his empire, her name appearing in small print beneath the Monarch Development brand. The golden chains were tight now, gleaming and beautiful, but chains nonetheless. And deep inside, in a place Olivia rarely acknowledged, a small voice whispered that something precious was slipping away. The crumbling facade. The first crack in the perfect facade appeared on a Tuesday afternoon. Olivia had finished early with the staging of Jackson's newest luxury apartment complex and decided to surprise him at his office. The secretary's flustered expression should have been her first warning. "Mr. Reed is in a meeting," she stammered, reaching for the phone. "It's fine, I'll just wait," Olivia replied, moving toward the sitting area. But the voices from behind the mahogany doors grew louder. "Jackson's," distinctive laugh followed by a woman's intimate murmur. Ignoring the secretary's protest, Olivia pushed open the door to find Jackson with his arms around Vanessa Winters, his company's legal counsel. Olivia. Jackson recovered quickly, straightening his tie. You should have called ahead. That night, between tears and accusations, Jackson masterfully rewrote the narrative. Vanessa was emotional about her divorce. He was merely comforting her. Wasn't Olivia being paranoid? Hadn't they discussed her tendency to overreact? But the seed of doubt had been planted, and Olivia began paying attention to the inconsistencies she'd been ignoring. The late meetings, the separate bank accounts she wasn't permitted to access, the constant monitoring of her whereabouts. When she found documents revealing Jackson had mortgaged her inherited property, the small cottage from her grandmother, that was legally still in her name, to fund one of his projects, Olivia finally saw the full picture. You forged my signature, she said, placing the papers on the kitchen island. That property was never meant to be part of Monarch. Jackson's charm evaporated. Don't be naive, Olivia. Everything we have is meant to grow what we're building together. What you're building, she corrected. I've become nothing but a decorative asset. The divorce filing made Jackson's true nature emerge fully. He froze their joint accounts. He called her clients personally to suggest she was going through some mental health challenges. When she interviewed with Hartman Design Group, the offer mysteriously evaporated after Jackson golfed with its CEO. You'll come back, Jackson told her at their final mediation meeting. You have nowhere else to go. Thanks to a shrewd divorce attorney who had faced Jackson in court before, Olivia managed to recover her grandmother's property and a modest settlement. But her professional reputation had been carefully dismantled by Jackson's whisper campaign. As she stood in the empty cottage, surrounded by the few possessions Jackson had deemed not acquired during the marriage, Olivia realized she would have to rebuild everything from scratch, with the weight of Jackson Reed's influence actively working against her. Seeds of renewal. The transformation of her grandmother's cottage into a home office took every penny of Olivia's settlement. She painted the walls herself, installed floating shelves for her design books, and converted the sunroom into a meeting space where potential clients could view her portfolio. Bennett Home Staging and Design officially opened 6 months after her divorce was finalized. The first clients were small homeowners desperate to sell in a challenging market, people who couldn't afford the premier staging companies and were willing to take a chance on her. You have a gift for seeing potential, remarked Mrs. Donovan, an elderly widow who sold her home of 40 years within a week after Olivia's staging. You made it feel both fresh and full of history. Word of mouth slowly brought more clients, though large real estate agencies still wouldn't work with her. Jackson's influence loomed large, and Olivia learned to target smaller realtors who operated outside his social circle. On a rainy April morning, a man in a practical gray coat stepped into her office without an appointment. Water dripped from his umbrella onto the welcome mat as he looked around with appreciation. The transformation from the exterior to this space is remarkable, he said. The cottage looks traditional from outside, but in here, it's like stepping into a contemporary design magazine that still feels like home. Olivia smiled professionally, though she was immediately struck by his observant nature. Thank you. Can I help you with something? I'm Ethan Parker, he said, extending his hand. I'm an architect working on the Riverside Community Center renovation. Our interior designer just backed out due to a family emergency, and we're on a tight deadline. The project was modest by her previous standards, a community center serving a working-class neighborhood, but it was the first commercial opportunity she'd had since the divorce. The budget is limited, Ethan warned. But we need someone who can create inviting, functional spaces that honor the community's history. Working with Ethan proved refreshingly straightforward. He valued her input, defended her ideas to the committee, and never once questioned her competence. The community center project led to a local library renovation, then a small boutique hotel. What Olivia didn't know was that Ethan had recognized her name immediately. As the founder of Parker Sustainable Design, he'd once been approached by Jackson to partner on a development, and had walked away disturbed by Jackson's ethical corners cutting. He had heard rumors about Olivia, but the quality of her work told a different story. Their professional relationship evolved naturally. Coffee meetings about color palettes became dinner discussions about design philosophy. Ethan spoke of architecture as a responsibility to create spaces that improved lives, not just impressed viewers. "You understand that too," he told her over dinner one evening. "I see it in how you approach every space, thinking about how people will live in it, not just how it photographs." For the first time since her divorce, Olivia felt seen for her talent, rather than as an accessory to someone else's success. Seeds of confidence, planted in fertile ground of genuine respect, began to take root and grow. The orchestrated humiliation. The invitation arrived on heavy cream cardstock, embossed with the logo of the Architectural Excellence Foundation. Jackson Reed was to receive the Urban Development Visionary Award at their annual gala, recognizing the revolutionary integration of luxury and sustainability in his latest project, a concept Olivia had initially developed. A handwritten note accompanied the formal invitation. "Thought you might like to see what real success looks like. Your presence would add a certain historical context to the evening. J." Olivia's first instinct was to throw it away, but something in his smug certainty that she would either decline or attend alone to be humiliated ignited a resolve she hadn't felt in years. The timing coincided with the completion of the Riverside Community Center, which had already received positive coverage in several design publications, though none mentioned her by name, another result of Jackson's influence over the major design magazines. The project had strengthened her portfolio significantly. "You should go," Ethan said when she showed him the invitation. "Your work deserves recognition in those circles, even if they don't know it yet." What Olivia didn't know was that Jackson had been monitoring her resurgence through a private investigator. He knew about the community center, the growing client list, and especially about Ethan Parker, though he dismissed him as a small-time architect working on charity projects. Jackson had carefully orchestrated the evening. Olivia would be seated at a table far from the stage, but visible enough for strategic introductions to people who knew the rumors about her. During his acceptance speech, he planned to reference her indirectly, a comment about those who couldn't maintain the standards of excellence Monarch demanded. The week before the gala, Jackson's assistant leaked a story to a gossip columnist about Olivia's desperate attempt to claw back into society by attending the gala alone. The article speculated that she was still obsessed with her ex-husband and unable to move forward professionally without his connections. On the night of the gala, Jackson stood in the reception area, champagne in hand, surrounded by admirers and industry power players. His new girlfriend, a model 20 years his junior, clung to his arm as he scanned the arriving guests for Olivia. When she finally appeared at the entrance, Jackson's practiced smile faltered momentarily. Olivia wore a simple but elegant midnight blue gown that highlighted her confidence rather than seeking attention. But it was her companion that caused Jackson's grip to tighten on his glass. Ethan Parker walked beside her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. And from the way the foundation's director immediately approached them, it was clear that Ethan was not just an unknown architect from a community project. Truth in full bloom. "Mr. Parker, we're honored you could join us tonight," the foundation director said, warmly shaking Ethan's hand before turning to Olivia. "And Ms. Bennett, your work on the Riverside project has been the talk of our sustainability committee." Jackson watched from across the room, his carefully planned script unraveling. He hadn't known, couldn't have known, that Ethan Parker was more than the modest architect he appeared to be. The name suddenly clicked into place. Parker Sustainable Design, the innovative firm that had won international recognition for revolutionizing eco-conscious urban spaces. The same firm that had declined his partnership offer 3 years ago. As dinner commenced, Jackson realized with growing horror that Ethan wasn't seated at some distant table. He was at the head table, directly across from the podium. The program, in front of him, which he hadn't bothered to read carefully, listed Ethan Parker as the keynote speaker, presenting the very award Jackson was receiving. When the foundation director took the stage, Her introduction sent a second shock through. Jackson, before we present our awards, I'm thrilled to announce the Foundation's International Urban Renewal Initiative, a series of projects bringing sustainable, beautiful design to underserved communities globally. Leading the design direction for this groundbreaking program will be Olivia Bennett, whose transformative work at the Riverside Community Center exemplifies our mission. Applause filled the room as Olivia briefly took the stage to acknowledge the appointment. Her speech was gracious, focusing on the importance of creating spaces that served people of all backgrounds, never once mentioning Jackson or their past. When it came time for Ethan to present Jackson's award, his introduction was professionally polite, but notably lacking the customary personal anecdotes that usually accompanied such presentations. Jackson's own speech felt hollow as he stood at the podium, aware that his moment of triumph had been overshadowed. At the reception afterward, Jackson maneuvered through the crowd toward Olivia, determined to reassert some control over the narrative. "Quite the performance," he said, his voice low. "I wonder how many people know you slept your way into that appointment." Ethan stepped forward, but Olivia placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You still don't understand, do you, Jackson?" she said, calmly. "Not everything is a performance or a manipulation. Some people succeed because of talent and integrity. The foundation approached me," she continued, "after their committee visited the community center. They had no idea about our history. Your influence doesn't extend as far as you think. And Ethan and I met through work, long after you and I were over." Several nearby conversations had quieted as people subtly tuned into their exchange. "In fact," Olivia added, her voice carrying just enough for those closest to hear, "I should thank you. If you hadn't forged my signature to mortgage my grandmother's cottage, I might never have discovered what I'm truly capable of building on my own." As murmurs spread through the nearby guests, Jackson's face reddened. The rumors would start immediately, not about Olivia's stability, but about his ethics. Later that evening, as Ethan drove them home, Olivia felt a profound sense of peace. She had not gone to the gala seeking revenge or validation. She had gone to reclaim her place in a world she loved, the world of creating spaces that mattered. "You were magnificent," Ethan said, taking her hand as they pulled up to her cottage, no longer just a refuge but the headquarters of her flourishing career. "Not magnificent," Olivia corrected him with a smile. "Just finally free." In the warm light of her porch, the cottage looked just as it had the day she had stood there alone, facing an uncertain future. But everything else had changed. The woman who had once been defined by Jackson Reed's perception was gone. In her place stood Olivia Bennett, a designer who had rebuilt her life with the same care and vision she brought to every project, creating something more beautiful and resilient than what had been destroyed.